My first question, Dr. Max, what is Munchausen syndrome by proxy?
Yeah, it's this really weird mental disorder where usually parents will make their kids sick in order to get attention and to have their kid be put in the role of patient and them be put in the role of parent of patient. It's different when somebody is faking an illness because they are trying to get out of trouble with the law or something like that. They really want the attention that comes with having a sick kid.
Why would somebody do such a thing?
Oh, that's like the $1 million question, and the answer is I don't know. It's this really weird combination of usually anxiety and delusions in their head, along with usually a pretty messed up personality structure, and then it all just kind of combines and reality gets blurred, and they kind of know that what they're doing is wrong, but they have this total lack of self-awareness at the same time. So it doesn't make sense. I mean, it happens, but it doesn't make sense why.
We want to be clear that in this indictment, nobody is alleging that Kelly Turner had Munchausen's by proxy, but it is mentioned, and I wanted to ask you if you saw symptoms of it.
Yeah, that is important to note, or important to note, I should say, that she doesn't, that she's not diagnosed with that in the indictment. She does bring it up in her interview with police and says, I know what Munchausen's by proxy is, and I don't have that, and that just kind of came out of nowhere, which is a little bit odd for somebody to say in a police interview. So I don't know, and I haven't evaluated her, so I don't know. I also don't know if everything in the indictment is 100% correct. Sometimes the police and the DA get little things wrong here and there. With that being said, the information that's in the indictment, it's pretty clearly leaning toward the fact that this little girl probably didn't have a lot of the illnesses that the mom said that she had. That there are doctors from Texas who said, no, she didn't have those diagnoses. There are doctors from Colorado who are saying, no, she didn't have these things, or her symptoms were really rare or bizarre, or that's not the way that the human body works. So that there are a lot of red flags that get raised in the indictment, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think what we see in this indictment too is we see all of the doctors. And so we see each one saying these things, and I think looking at that you might think, well, why the heck wasn't this caught? But those doctors weren't communicating with each other all the time.
Exactly, and they wouldn't even have known to communicate with each other. A lot of these doctors, they wouldn't necessarily have known that this little girl had seen so many other doctors, or had seen this specific doctor in Texas, and then this specific doctor in Colorado. So they wouldn't have even known to talk to one another. That's why it really takes a forensic investigator to put it all together to start to make sense of it, and that's also why it often goes undiagnosed.
Mm-hmm. Something you were saying earlier, with this illness, it is not common for the child to die. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Yes. The goal in the mind of the person who is doing this to their kid is to be in the role of parent of a sick kid, and to get that attention. Sometimes there's money that comes along with it too, GoFundMe or Make-A-Wish Foundation or things like that. So the goal is not to kill your child, it's to have a sick child. Now, sometimes these cases tragically end in death, but usually those deaths are accidental. They're trying to keep the kid alive and sick.
A lot of what is said in here, when investigators say they talked to the doctors said all of the symptoms came from the mom, not from the child. What does that say to you?
Yeah, that's, honestly, that one isn't quite as much of a red flag. It might be a little bit weird because You would expect, if a kid has a stomach ache, the kid can kind of tell you about, where it hurts and how it hurts, and on a scale from 0 to 10, so that there's some information that kids can give about their illnesses. But when pediatricians are working with doctors, a lot of the information that they get is from the parents. So that part of it isn't quite as unusual if that were the only potential concern here. When you add that to lots of other stuff that's in the indictment, then even that aspect becomes worrying.
Something it also mentioned was sometimes doctors separate parents from kids, and that was not done in Olivia's case. Is it common for that to happen?
Yeah, so the doctors will do that sometimes. They'll do a brief exam with the kid and ask the kid a lot of questions when the parent is gone to kind of get a sense, like, what's really going on, or is there something weird maybe that's going on? That doesn't happen all that often, and I think it's you can't fault doctors or nurses. They work very hard. They work long hours. They're there to trust their patients and their patients' family members. And they aren't police detectives, so they're just there to help, so that they don't always take that step.
What was your initial reaction reading this indictment?
My initial reaction reading the indictment is, if the stuff in there is true and it's proven, beyond a reasonable doubt, that it sounds like Munchausen's by proxy, and it sounds like a woman who has taken it a step further than it normally is taken. I don't know why that is, but that's that seems to be where signs are pointing in this particular case.
Emotionally, what was your reaction?
Oh, it's heartbreaking to read about and at the same time, it sounded very familiar because I've done these evaluations before, and they follow a very similar pattern. And it was like, well, here's the same pattern over again. This one ended in death. Others that I have done haven't ended in death, but all the patterns sounded the same. So that it's so sad, and it's sad that I recognized it too.
Yeah. How common is this illness?
It's not very common. And experts don't really they will readily admit that they don't exactly know how common it is, because the people who have it lie. That's part of the deal. They're lying about their kids being sick, and they are breaking the law. So they aren't going to tell anybody. Even if they came to a counselor and said, I think I have Munchausen's by proxy and I've been making my kids sick. If somebody told that to me, I'm a mandated reporter. The first thing I would have to do is call the police. So they aren't going to tell anybody what they're doing. So I think it goes undiagnosed and unreported a lot. There are some estimates that say that as many as 1% of kids who are seen in ERs may be victims, but that seems kind of high to me. My guess is that it's probably lower than that.
Anything else you want to leave us with that you think is important that we should be talking about?
Yeah, I guess there are a couple things. One is that there's not very good treatment for this either. Partially because it's so rare, and the people who have it rarely seek out treatment. But it tends to be a pretty severe, lifelong disorder, and it's possible to get better, to gain some self-awareness, to kind of tease apart some of the delusions, because after a while, these people kind of stop realizing that they're doing it to the kid themselves, and they think that it's real too. So so it's possible to break through some of that, but it's really hard. And a lot of people with Munchausen's by proxy don't have the motivation to get better, because then they're losing that victim status, or that parent of a sick kid status. So that would be one thing that I would want to mention. Not a super happy thought, but it's tough to treat. I guess the other thing I would want to say is that this is really rare. That when doctors see really sick kids, they're really sick, and they really have those diseases, and their parents are suffering, and they are miserable. They are not getting any sort of internal benefit or pleasure from being the parent of a sick kid. We need to remember that, because this is going to be plastered all over the news, and it's going to seem so sensational, and like that how is this happening all the time? Are my neighbors doing this? No, if these kids are sick, that it's usually because they're sick.
And the consequences of misdiagnosing something like this would be incredibly severe.
That's a great point. The doctors don't want to miss something just because they're worried that every parent they talk to has Munchausen's by proxy.